Hello and welcome back to Christian Education, Mount Calvary, Madison for September 6, 2020. We have finished up the Unit 2 discussions on faith and wisdom in the book of James. And now we're headed into the New Testament, Unit 3, and we're talking about struggles with love. And today's lesson is coming from Genesis 37 in the title, When Love is Lost. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Deacon Akins. I'm a member at Mount Calvary, Madison, where Bishop Sandy McLean is the pastor and First Lady Sarah McLean. Thank you for joining us. Get right into it, and I'll read the key verse and give you a little background history. The key verse says, "And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying." And the key verse is talking about the second dream that Joseph had. Joseph felt good about telling his dream. He had no idea in the beginning that later he would become an interpreter of dreams, but he was excited about it. And this lesson gives us an idea of what can go wrong with favoritism, and it gives us some insight on ways we can make changes ourselves for the future. So Joseph is the son of Jacob, first son of Jacob and Rachel. Jacob has plenty of history, and Rachel has some history in trying to help God with his plan when they're not asked to. So if we go back to the time of Abraham, we'll notice this didn't start overnight. So Abraham's wife Sarah also was barren, and they both had questions, and they both stepped in and tried to help God with their future. Uh, and I won't go deeper into the subject, but after this, they had a son named Isaac. Isaac also, uh, he was being a first child of Sarah and Abraham, similar to similar to Joseph being the first child of Rachel and Jacob. So favoritism is a pattern that we can set up, but God always gives us the opportunity to break any pattern that's not in his will. Um, so Isaac's wife, Rebecca, uh, was closer to Jacob. Isaac was closer to Esau. Uh, Another pattern of favoritism. And again, I will not go into all the details, but I'm just setting the stage for this lesson. So in the end, we find out that it all worked out in his family's favor. But I'm only doing a portion of the lesson, so I won't go past my limit. So um, Jacob, uh, following in the footsteps of Isaac after all the struggles he's been through, he's in the house of Laban, and he's been seeking Rachel. He ended up having to work 7 years for Rachel, only to be tricked into marrying Leah. Again, he was tricked into working another 7 years to get Rachel, the woman he wanted in the beginning. And on top of that, he ended up working another 6 years, which made him in Laban's household for a full 20 years. Now, during this time, Jacob learned plenty. Uh, he, he even started families with everyone except for Leah, excuse me, Rachel, and her helpers. But in the end, Rachel would complain that she had no children, and matter of fact, she spoke the words, "Without children, I might as well be dead." And Jacob didn't like that, and it would come back to, in some ways, haunt her. At another time, after time passed, uh, God spoke to Jacob to get out. Time to move out and head for the hills, so to speak. So Jacob went back and told his wives and his servants to get ready. They were going to make a move. Meanwhile, overnight, Rachel decides to steal some of the household goods and hide them in her saddle on her camel. So, as God prepared them to leave, they left Laban, and he told them to get 2 days, 3 days ahead. And by the time that Laban caught up to the caravan, they had set up camp. So Laban had his men go through all the camp looking for his goods. After looking over everything, Rachel spoke up and said, "Please, Father, don't make me get off my camel. That time of the month is on for me, my cycle." So after time passed, Rachel and Jacob, they have another son, but this is after this lesson. Meanwhile, Jacob and Laban calls a truce there in Mizpah, and this is where we get, "May the Lord watch between me and thee while we are apart one from another." And I think that's enough to lead us into these verses, which starts with verse 2 through 11. I'll read the verses and we'll carry on from there. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Excuse me. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. They could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren. They hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, "Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf." And his brethren said to him, "Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?" And they hated him all the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and he told it his brethren. And he said, "Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." Verse 10 says, "And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth?" And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. So automatically, Jacob has to think about this, because all he has already done, he has already set the stage for division. But God's will be accomplished. At 17, Joseph, being an upright young man, he's out in the fields. He knows no better. When he sees his brothers doing evil business with foreigners, at the time. These caravans we would come by later and take Joseph to Egypt, and any activity that was not according to his father's will, he would report it to his father. And unknowingly, his father set him up for his first fall. When we get the story of the account, which many people call from the pit to the palace. And in verse 3, Joseph makes him a kingly robe or coat, which is colorful, and it really gets up under his brother's skin to watch him hang around his dad and be close, and understandable. And we today have to guard ourselves daily. God has a plan for all of our children, and we have to nurture them for who they are individually. And we learn a lot from this lesson along those lines. At the same time, we have to nurture each one in the way that we spiritually see in Romans 8. There's no more condemnation, and God has set aside some chosen for his plan. And Joseph being the one in this lesson who is set aside for a direct mission. And we've gone over this many times, but as I said, this is setting up for, first of all, Joseph being not only a dreamer, but later he would understand that God has given him interpretation of dreams. So now he's only becoming known as the dreamer, and he's also known to his brothers as being a tattletale. And his father rebuked him, but like I said before, he kept this in mind. And the other thing that comes to mind with me is this is not the first time that this is the second time that in this lineage, that a child has been born of a virgin. This is the first time, but there would be another time. So we'll go into the second part of this lesson. This verses 2 through 11 is known as the source of hate. Part 2, we'll talk a little bit about the result of hate. What will hate make you do? What does hate make me do? Verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors, that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen. And they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. So that is the last verses of this lesson. But you notice in 23, and we've studied this lesson many times. We know that Joseph was not only stripped of his coat, but they later would blood stain it and try to use it as proof that he was dead. And they took him and they cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. And if you may recall, Isaac was a well digger, and he was good at irrigation systems. And this here it just so happened to be an empty well. So there's a lot can come out of this. A lot of old sayings can come out of these lessons. Sometimes you can dig your own pit. But in this case, it was a family stumbling block. Then there passed Midianites, relatives, merchantmen, and drew near, lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold him. Ishmaelites, more relatives. If you remember, Ishmaelites were descended from Abraham and Hagar. 20 pieces of silver would come to play in the New Testament, again, in the similarity of Joseph or Joseph and Jesus, Yeshua. And the same brought Joseph into Egypt. So the result of this hate toward their brother, they had come together and thought about killing him, but cooler heads prevailed and they decided they would sell him. And this is a part of God's plan. And they ended up selling him to some of their relatives. So in order to keep this lesson from going too far into next week's lesson, there'll be I know there'll be a great teacher next week who will go more in depth of what happens after Joseph goes to Egypt. So I'll try to stay in this lesson, and I'll try to stay on point for how does this affect us today in when love is lost. We have an opportunity to try to be fair, not only with our immediate families, our co-workers, church family, wherever God sends us. It's a great opportunity to try to practice fairness and try to avoid favoritism. In one of the parables, Jesus is saying, when I was hungry, where were you? When I was naked, you didn't help me. So sometimes the people that are sent to us to help are the exact ones that we are avoiding today. This nation is a great example of what can happen when love is lost. This is a great opportunity for healing for all of us. It's a good opportunity for us to be used by God to do great works. Of course, we know this is a time. There's only 3 dispensations. The first one was before Adam, time before man, this time, and there will be another time when Jesus returned. So that will be our 3rd dispensation. And I spoke a little bit last week, from last week's lesson, about deception. And again, we're dealing with the results of a lot of deception and unfairness, but God has a way of making it work out for our good. We're living in a time where it make you wonder, as David did in the 73rd Psalm, why does the wicked seem to be prospering? So we have to answer the question the same way. Will their 20 pieces of silver benefit them? Or will I stay in the sanctuary and understand that God is showing me their end? If I can stay in my lane, I believe that God is doing great works in all of us. So I should be okay with knowing that He didn't send me here to destroy anybody. I'm here to help connect. So in this lesson, there's a great lessons, many to be learned. Every family's got problems, but God is the only answer. Jesus has done everything for us. In the end, it will come down to Do I understand love? What is love? Do I love my neighbor as myself? Do I love myself? Do I understand my purpose? Do I understand all the stumbling blocks that will come against me? Uh, when Jesus spoke to certain spirits and told them to get behind me, that don't mean get right next to me, right behind me. When he said get behind me, they have to go outside of the will of God, a long way back. Because grace and mercy is following me, the 23rd Psalm. Jesus, the Lord of my life, is leading me, and I'm covered all around. I'm surrounded by the right spirit. As long as I walk in God's will. I'm like you, very human. Matter of fact, I'll be at work in a few minutes and my humanity will be tested. But I'm doing this lesson for September 6th, and by this time, God will give me new challenges, and I hope I will be able to stand, and I hope you will be able to stand. And I thank you all for another opportunity to just sit before you with the Word of God. And I thank God for another day. And we'll just close out with, from this point forward, Lord, allow the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart to be acceptable in thy sight. You are my strength and my Redeemer. Amen.